Okay, cool. Can everyone see my slides and see me and hear me?
Yep.
Sorry, I was waiting for more. I don't know why, but I was waiting for a response from the room there. Okay, so hi, my name is Pete, and for the next 15 minutes or so, I'm going to be talking to you about publishing agreement pitfalls. So super quick bit about me. My name is Pete Lewin, Legal Gamer UK on Twitter. I'm an interactive entertainment lawyer, which means I deal with everything video games related, developers, publishers, esports, digital broadcast, things like that. I've been specialist in the games industry for nearly 7 years now. I've seen probably hundreds of different types of game development, licensing, publishing deals over the years, super small ones all the way up to AAA. So hopefully I'm coming from a good place of experience to talk about this today. So why are we here? I mean, this whole session is about funding for your studio or for your game. The previous speakers, some great talks on largely company financing. Publishing agreements will be more skewed towards project financing. So publishers, obviously a great source of that. And publishing agreements, obviously super important. It could be the one agreement which governs your relationship with your partner for your kind of core IP for the next 5-10 years. If that turns out to be the lifeblood of your studio, it can be the most important agreement you ever sign. So this talk is mainly skewed towards developers and some of the things that developers can look out for when negotiating these deals, but it's not just for developers. Everything I say on the other side is the publisher, and publishers themselves have their own IP. They sub-publish in different territories. They subcontract out porting work. So hopefully there's something in here for everyone. So publishing agreements, it's basically just a big document setting out what rights a developer is giving a publisher over their game. So the first thing, and obviously really important thing you want to do is check what rights a developer is actually giving to a publisher. And on the screen here are 4 of the kind of main buckets of things that I keep an eye out for. The first one is platforms. You want to make sure that you're giving the publisher rights to the right platforms and the right platforms only. Because in most publishing deals, well, not most, but in a lot of publishing deals, everything's just thrown into a single bucket. You give away rights to all platforms that exist now, that might ever exist, streaming, next gen, yeah, you name it. But I think developers should be more kind of they should question that more to make sure that they definitely want to do that from the beginning. Because just for example, you're making a game for say PC and console, and you think down the line you might have a good opportunity to turn this into a mobile game. But what if your publisher that you're speaking to now doesn't actually have any experience in mobile publishing and all the kind of peculiarities that come along with that? Well, in that case, you might not want to just give away mobile rights from the beginning. You might want to save that as a kind of later discussion rather than locking it away now. So territories, pretty self-explanatory and just kind of like platforms. Think about what parts of the world you're giving away rights to. A lot of the times it's just on a worldwide basis. A lot of the times that's fine. But again, if you think your game might have particular appeal in certain territories, say China or India, then think about that before you sign that piece of paper, because some of these territories are getting increasingly complicated to operate in, and you might need to have a kind of partner that's got certain expertise in order to make your game successful over there. So China, for example, you actually need a local partner, like a Chinese partner to get your game out. So does your Western publisher actually have contacts in China to help get your game approved and released? If yes, great. If no, then I think you should question, do you want to be giving rights to this publisher who will then just sub-publish in China? Or do you want to carve back China for now and then maybe just go and find your own Chinese publisher later down the line? So think about territories. Types of rights. By this, I mean things like merchandise and general ancillary exploitations, it's sometimes called that. And really, this is another thing which is just bunged in there, usually really quickly in some short section, saying the publisher has rights to do all these kind of things. But I would recommend not giving something away for nothing. Ask the publisher what their plans are for kind of ancillary exploitation like this. A lot of the times they might come back and say nothing, in which case you might not want to give it away. This is becoming more important now. transmedia opportunities are just blowing up huge in the industry. Indie games have book deals, animated TV shows, full feature-length movies, Netflix shows. So don't give something away for nothing. And then duration, just make sure you know how long you're actually signing with your publisher for a specific game. Maybe it's a set period of time, 10 years, maybe it's forever until you both agree to kind of end it. Maybe it's 5 years and it automatically renews every year, whatever. Just be clear how long your game is tied up. So the kind of ultimate goal here, and I've got one of these for each of the slides, is just be clear who is getting rights over what, and ask yourself, why is this the right person to be giving rights to now? So the second bucket of things to keep an eye out for is IP ownership, often seen as the absolute holy grail in most deals. If you keep ownership of your game, then you're absolutely golden, right? And yeah, it's definitely really important. But I would stress the need to think about IP ownership in light of the entire deal that you're signing, and not just looking at that one section called IP ownership, because there's a bunch of different ways that other stuff in the agreement can impact on the benefits of having IP ownership. So the first of these, the first way it can kind of be tied up a little bit is in relation to publishing rights and giving exclusive publishing rights. Because if you own the game, the developer, but you've given exclusive publishing rights to a partner, which cover this game, maybe sequels and prequels and ports and revised editions and remasters and expansions, and maybe even just future games you make, then yeah, you've got ownership, but contractually you've kind of tied yourself up with this publisher, and you can't really do anything with your IP without that publisher in the future, which can sometimes get a bit rocky if things don't go well with your publisher. So rather than just giving everything away at the start, maybe a kind of compromise approach is to put some of this stuff under what's called a right of first offer instead. So that's the second thing on the slide here, a ROFO and a ROLO. So a right of first offer is where a developer essentially says, if I do any of these things, or if I want to do any of these things in the future, I'll bring it to you, publisher, first, and I'll give you first bite at the cherry at doing that thing, publishing that game. A right of last offer is where a developer is essentially allowed to go out into the free market and find a new partner for their next project or whatever it is. But before they sign that deal with that new partner, they have to go back to the first publisher and say, here's what I've got from them. Do you want to match it? And then I'll sign with you instead. So right of first offers are pretty common. Right of last offers are not very common, and I generally suggest avoiding them wherever possible. So that's what a right of first offer is, fairly common. The first thing you're going to need to keep an eye out for is what is actually caught by this right of first offer, because it can be anything from, like I say, sequels, prequels, DLC, expansions. It might be as wide as just other games you make. So a developer should think about, okay, what am I actually tying myself into to talk about with this publisher in the future? And the second part is being clear in the publishing agreement the procedural mechanics of how those rights of first offer, last offer actually work. For example, when does the developer have to tell the publisher about this next project? How long do they have to try and reach an agreement before the developer is allowed to go elsewhere? What happens if they can't reach agreement? Just nailing down some of these mechanics in the publishing agreement is going to be crucial, because otherwise a developer can basically just be locked in with a publisher for ages, and they're not clear when they can and can't go elsewhere. So IP ownership, really important, but don't tunnel vision on it. Think about everything else going on in the rest of the deal. Really important. So financial problems. So conscious of time here. 4 things you want to keep an eye out for. Cost recoupment. So where is the publisher actually going to recoup all of their development costs, marketing, UA, you name it from? Is it from all of the gross revenue that the game makes, or is it just from, say, the developer's share of net revenue? And I've put on the slide here, I'm pointing upwards because that's where my slides are. I put on the slides here how the difference of a few words can make all of the difference. Because if costs are just being recouped from the developer's share, then that's probably usually a much worse deal for the developer, because it essentially means that they are the ones kind of bearing the cost for all of these things that are being recouped. and it's going to take ages for them to actually see any payout, because it's going to take longer for the recoup to happen because it's coming from a smaller pool of money. The next point is about recoup rate. So some publishers recoup all of their costs at 100%, which basically means all the money the game makes goes to the publisher from the very beginning. Sometimes it can be agreed that only, say, 70% or some other percentage will go towards recoup, whereas the rest is kind of split between the parties. So that means the developer starts getting some money from day one, which can be great. Payment timeframes. Basically, just make sure you're not going to get bottlenecked as a studio. You're not going to get money on day one. One of the other speakers said earlier that it can just take ages to get money from platforms. And yeah, when you've got a publisher involved, it can take even longer. So think about, do you get paid monthly or quarterly? When is the publisher going to send you a royalty statement? When do you have to send an invoice by? And how long after you submit an invoice are they actually going to pay you? Because these can all stack up really quickly, and it might be 6 months before you actually start seeing any money. Deductions, obvious one. Developer wants to keep these categories narrow. Publisher wants to keep it wide to just leave the door open for future stuff. Try and come up with some reasonable compromises here. Maybe you could agree some sort of cap on deductions, pre-approval for some things, or just craft umbrella categories of some things that can be deducted, some things that can't be. Basically, be clear who's getting paid, what, and when. Termination rights, last thing I'm covering. It's a bit doom and gloom to be thinking about it at the start of a relationship. You hope you never need it. It's just like insurance. But if you've thought about it at the start, you'll be glad you did. So it's worth bearing in mind that termination rights are different from termination consequences, and you've got to look at both kind of separately but together. So there's some standard things that you'll see in most deals: material breach, insolvency, maybe this thing called force majeure. Don't have to get into that now. One developers want to keep an eye out for is termination for convenience. This is basically a right that lets a publisher terminate for any reason at all, even if the developer is not at fault. Developers usually want to get that out. Publishers, in some circumstances, totally reasonable for them to want to have it in. Maybe it's a really high-risk project. They've not worked with the partner before. Maybe there's a lot of funding, and they basically just need that kill switch. So no right, no wrong. But think about it and think about the implications it has for your studio. Then, like I say, think about the consequences of termination, because those can vary significantly and they can impact the overall fairness of these termination rights. So if you've got a termination for convenience right and the publisher exercises it, but they say, if I actually exercise it, I'll pay you all the development funding. You can go do whatever you want with the game. That's not so bad. But I've also seen deals where a publisher has a termination for convenience right, but then they say the developer has to pay back all the development funding paid up until that point. Or maybe they have to grant a residual revenue share to the publisher. I've even seen deals that say the publishing agreement exclusivity rights survive past termination of the agreement, which doesn't make any sense because the agreement terminates, it should be over. So look at termination rights, look at consequences, and make sure they're basically fair and appropriate for the risks that each party is taking. So I hope this hasn't been doom and gloom. It should not be, because publishers, they can be really awesome. I don't need to tell anyone in attending this talk why publishers can be fantastic. They've made some games absolute successes, which they might not have otherwise been. They provide crucial support and resources that developers can't get on their own or just don't have the time to. It could be funding, it could be mentoring, outsourced development, emotional assistance, marketing, UA, localization, age ratings. All of these things can be absolutely crucial. But I think developers should be more critical of the deals they're signing. And I think publishers, a lot of publishers, could deal with reflecting a bit more on the terms of their deals that they're offering to partners, just to make sure that it's actually aligned and appropriate to the deal that they're looking to sign right then and there. And that's it. My contact details are here. That's super bright. Apologies. Again, Peter Lewin from Wiggin. You can catch me on Twitter, and that's my email address.